Let's continue learning about respiratory system. So, chemical regulation of respiration in detail. Chemical regulation of respiration plays a crucial role in maintaining the appropriate levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body. It involves the detection of changes in blood gas concentrations by specialized chemoreceptors and the subsequent adjustments in respiratory activity to restore homeostasis. Here is a detailed explanation of the chemical regulation of respiration. Central chemoreceptors location. The central chemoreceptors are located in the medulla oblongata near the respiratory centers. Their sensitivity. These chemoreceptors primarily respond to changes in the pH of the cerebrospinal fluid, which indirectly reflects changes in arterial CO2 levels. An increase in arterial CO2 levels to the formation of carbonic acid, lowering the pH of the CSF. Then response. When the central chemoreceptors detect an increase in CO2 and a subsequent decrease in pH, they send signals to the medullary respiratory centers, resulting in an increase in respiratory rate and depth. This response helps eliminate excess CO2 by increasing the amount of ventilation. Then peripheral chemoreceptors location. Peripheral chemoreceptors are located in the carotid bodies and aortic bodies, which are specialized structures in the carotid arteries and aorta respectively. These chemoreceptors respond to changes in arterial blood gas levels, including decreased O2 levels or hypoxia and increased CO2 and H plus ion levels, acidosis. And the peripheral chemoreceptors detect low arterial O2 levels of high O2 levels or high CO2 and H plus ion levels. They send signals to the medullary respiratory centers. This triggers an increase in respiratory rate and depth to enhance O2 uptake and eliminate excess CO2 and H plus ions. Then oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. The oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve represents the relationship between arterial O2 saturation and the partial pressure of oxygen in blood. Shifts in the curve. Various factors can shift the curve to right or left. A rightward shift indicates reduced affinity of hemoglobin for O2, making it easier for O2 to dissociate from hemoglobin, while a leftward shift indicates increased affinity. Then Bohr effect. Bohr effect refers to the phenomenon where an increase in CO2 and H plus ions promote the release of O2 from hemoglobin. This allows O2 to be more readily available to tissues during periods of increased metabolic activity. Then other chemical factors, carbon dioxide, increased levels of CO2 in the blood, hypercapnia, stimulate chemoreceptors in the central and peripheral regions, leading to an increase in respiratory rate and depth. Then hydrogen ions, pH changes in blood pH, mainly caused by alterations in CO2 levels, influence respiratory activity. Acidosis or decreased pH stimulate increased ventilation, while alkalosis, increased pH, reduces ventilation. The chemical regulation of respiration is vital for maintaining blood gas homeostasis and ensuring adequate oxygenation of tissues. It allows the body to respond to changes in metabolic demands and environmental conditions. Disruptions in this regulatory system can result in respiratory disorders such as hypoventilation or hyperventilation. In conclusion, the chemical regulation of respiration involves the coordination of central and peripheral chemoreceptors that respond to changes in arterial blood gas concentrations. This regulation ensures the appropriate respiratory response to maintain adequate O2 levels, eliminate excess CO2, and restore acid base balance in the body. Respiratory centers in detail. The respiratory centers in the brain play a critical role in regulating and coordinating the breathing process. These centers are responsible for initiating and controlling the rhythmic movements of the respiratory muscles, ensuring the exchange of gases in the lungs. Medullary respiratory centers location. The medullary respiratory centers are located in the medulla oblongata, which is the lower part of the brain stem. Then ventral respiratory group or VRG. The VRG is responsible for generating the basic rhythm of breathing. It consists of both inspiratory and expiratory neurons that control the contraction and relaxation of the respiratory muscles. Then dorsal respiratory group. The DRG receives sensory input from the peripheral chemoreceptors and sends signals to the VRG to modulate the respiratory rate and depth. Next, pneumotaxic center. The pneumotaxic center is located in the upper part of the pons. The pneumotaxic center regulates the duration and rate of inspiration by inhibiting the inspiratory neurons in the medulla. It helps control the switch between inspiration and expiration of fine-tunes the respiratory pattern. Then apneustic center location. The apneustic center is located in the lower part of the pons. The apneustic center stimulates the inspiratory neurons in the medulla, prolonging the duration of inspiration. It works in opposition to pneumotaxic center to regulate the respiratory pattern. Respiratory centers and sleep. During sleep, the activity of the respiratory centers changes. The medullary respiratory centers remain active, but the influence of higher brain centers decreases, leading to a more rhythmic and regulated breathing pattern. Then, respiratory centers and exercise. During exercise, the respiratory centers receive signals from various sources, including chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, and higher brain centers. This information helps adjust the respiratory rate and depth to meet the increased oxygen demands of the muscles. Importance: breathing control. The respiratory centers are responsible for maintaining the rhythmic pattern of breathing, ensuring a continuous and coordinated exchange of gases and lungs. Then gas exchange. By regulating the respiratory rate and depth, the respiratory centers help match the supply of oxygen to the metabolic demands of body and remove excess carbon dioxide. Then homeostasis. The respiratory centers play a vital role in maintaining acid-base balance by adjusting the ventilation rate to regulate the levels of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions in the blood. Adaptation to changing conditions. The respiratory centers can quickly respond to changes in oxygen levels, carbon dioxide levels, and pH, allowing the body to adapt to various physiological and environmental conditions. So, in conclusion, the respiratory centers and the brain, including the medullary respiratory centers, pneumotaxic center, and apneustic center, are essential for regulating and coordinating the breathing process. They ensure the rhythmic movements of the respiratory muscles, control the rate and depth of ventilation, and help maintain gas exchange and acid-base balance in the body. The proper functioning of these centers is crucial for overall respiratory function and maintaining homeostasis. Then, respiration. The process of breathing is regulated by various factors to ensure the proper exchange of gases and maintain homeostasis. These factors work together to control the rate and depth of breathing based on the body's metabolic needs. So, oxygen levels. As oxygen levels decrease in the blood, peripheral chemoreceptors located in the carotid bodies and aortic arch detect the change and send signals to the respiratory centers in the brainstem to increase the rate and depth of breathing. This response helps ensure an adequate supply of oxygen to meet the body's demands. Then carbon dioxide levels. Increased levels of carbon dioxide in the blood trigger the central chemoreceptors in the medulla to stimulate the respiratory centers, resulting in an increase in breathing rate and depth. The primary drive to breathe is based on the need to remove excess carbon dioxide from the body. Hydrogen ion concentration. Changes in blood pH, primarily caused by the accumulation of carbon dioxide, can stimulate the central chemoreceptors and influence respiration. An increase in hydrogen ion concentration or acidosis leads to an increase in the respiratory rate to remove excess carbon dioxide and restore acid-base balance. Then neural factors. Medullary respiratory centers. The medullary respiratory centers, including the ventral respiratory group and dorsal respiratory group, play a crucial role in controlling the basic rhythm of breathing. They receive input from various sources, including chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, and higher brain centers, to modulate the respiratory rate and depth. Then pneumotaxic center located in the pons. The pneumotaxic center helps regulate the duration and rate of inspiration by sending inhibitory signals to the medullary respiratory centers. It contributes to fine-tuning the respiratory pattern. Then cerebral cortex has voluntary control over respiration. It can override the automatic control by the respiratory centers and modify the breathing pattern consciously, such as during activities like speaking or holding the breath. Other factors: lung stretch receptors. Located in the lung tissue, stretch receptors respond to the degree of lung inflation. When the lungs are overly inflated, these receptors send inhibitory signals to the medullary respiratory centers, causing a decrease in the respiratory rate and preventing overinflation. Then irritant receptors. Found in the airways, irritant receptors respond to irritating substances such as dust or chemical irritants. When stimulated, they initiate reflexes that can cause bronchoconstriction, coughing, or changes in the respiratory rate to protect the lungs.